Welcome to Obedience and Prosperity as we continue our study in the days of prosperity. This is Regina Sanders, the Bible Coach, with Live Your Best Life Coaching. In these lessons that we are exploring in this study, the days of prosperity, the first thing that we've learned is that there are 50 days between Passover and Shavuot, or Pentecost as it's known in the church. Again, Pentecost, also known by its Hebrew name Shavuot, is the summer feast of God. The days in between Passover and Pentecost are the time that we count the Omer. We bless God with prayer and learn about His attributes, which all have a foundation of love. So the next part of this slide that you're seeing tells you that I found a great article on Chabad.org which explains why we count up the Omer instead of doing a countdown of the days in between. And it tells you that I'd like to share it with you now. I'm not actually going to read this article to you now, but what I will do is point you back to the first video in this series, The Days of Prosperity, so that you can hear that article. Again, the title of the article is Why Do We Count Up the Omer? And it is written by Malky Janowski. You can also read this article on Chabad.org, which again is CHABAD.org. Psalms chapter 25, verse 13 declares, His soul will abide in prosperity, and his descendants will inherit the land. That's the New American Standard Bible. The NIV says, He will spend his days in prosperity. So total immersion is the reason for the format of these lessons, to totally immerse us in God's Word. They will help you further develop your faith in God's determination to see you prosper. So I encourage you, use these lessons as an opportunity for you and your family and your business or ministry to totally immerse yourself in a daily study of prosperity, God's desire to prosper you. So who am I? I am Regina Sanders. I am the Bible Coach. I received my accreditation for life coaching through IACCC. I'm a stage 3 colon cancer survivor, and I'm an author. I have 2 books in print format. I have several ebooks, but 2 books that are in print format that are available through barnesandnoble.com as well as amazon.com, and they are My Cup Runneth Over and A Journey into Understanding. I'm a minister. If you're listening to this video, you are on my ministry page, my ministry blog, which is pastorreginasanders.blogspot.com. I also have a business page with a blog, which is reginasanders.net. I'm a wife and I'm a mother. Now, the mission, as I prayed over and thought about what my mission would be as a life coach, the Bible coach, it was important to me to have that foundation of Scripture. And so I prayed and I sought the Lord, and I just asked Him, Lord, what is my mission? What do you desire my mission to be in this business? And He pointed me to Isaiah chapter 61. And it's there that we learn we are called to strengthen the sickly, to heal the diseased, to bind the broken, to bring back the scattered, and to seek the lost. And that is the mission of Live Your Best Life Coaching. Regina Sanders, the Bible Coach. That is it, in a nutshell, those 5 things. Again, you can find them in Isaiah chapter 61. So some of the things that you're going to learn in today's lesson, we will look at and focus how Isaiah obeyed God in the time of a famine. We're going to explore how obedience opens the door to kingdom prosperity. And we're also going to explore a couple paragraphs from an excerpt of the book, The Blessing of the Lord Makes Rich, and He Adds No Sorrow to It, by Kenneth Copeland. And I pray that you have got your notebook and your pens ready. If not, pause the video, take a moment, go grab you a notebook, grab you a pen, get prepared to take notes. Also available for download are the slides that correspond with this video. So I encourage you, download them. They're free, and they will bless you. They will be there to help you as you study throughout this week and up into next week and the days ahead. So let's begin. I actually want us to turn to Genesis chapter 26, and we're going to read verses 2 through 6. It says, "The Lord appeared to him and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws.' So Isaac lived in Gerar." Wow, that's a mouthful. Isaac lived in Gerar. So now let's break this down. Verses 3 and 4 tell us that Isaac prospered right where he was, even though there was a famine in the land. I jumped ahead. No, I didn't. So if we look at the little boxes here in our slide, we see first it says, "Do not descend to Egypt, for you are an unblemished offering, and it does not befit you to reside outside of the land." That's actually a quote of this, but this is coming from the Humash, the Stone Edition, which is the Hebrew Bible. Now in verses 3 and 4, we see that Isaac prospered right where he was. You see, God needed Isaac there to establish the Garden of Eden. And God needs us here to establish the Garden of Eden. So what do I mean by that? The Garden of Eden here represents the time before the fall when Adam and Eve had communion and rest with the Lord. They walked in His peace continuously. God allows us to establish the Garden of Eden in our lives, in our homes, our cities, our communities, and our nation through our obedience to Him and through remaining in His presence. We can change the atmosphere around us simply by inviting Him into it, inviting His presence to be here with us. Isn't that awesome? Have you experienced that? Have you experienced the changing of the atmosphere through inviting Him in and Him taking you up on your invitation? You know, He loves to be invited to spend time with you. So verses 3 through 5 tell us the result of obedience. Verse 6 tells us that Isaac obeyed and he stayed in Gerar. And we see uh, that, well, let's go back. I'm getting ahead of myself. So just as there were results or consequences for obedience for Isaac, there are results, consequences for your obedience as well. Remember verse 4 says, by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. You are a part of those nations, and it is God's good pleasure to bless you. It was possible for Isaac to receive the good blessing, this promise of prosperity, because, number one, Abraham set the example of obeying God, keeping God's charge, His commandments, His statutes, and His laws. And number two, because Isaac chose to follow in his father's footsteps of obedience. So, when we see sojourn, stay here, sojourn, don't go down to Egypt. That is to take possession, because you already own this place. The land was his. It was promised to him through the Abrahamic covenant. He says, if you'll walk around with the attitude of faith, I will do for you exactly what I did for your father. I will give you everything that I gave him. So to quote Gloria Copeland, don't go to the world, to Egypt. Go to the Word. How often are we tempted to go to the world? You know, maybe your car breaks down and you don't have the finances sitting right there in your bank account to cover the necessary repairs. So what's the first thing that we do? Well, Lord, who can we borrow the money from? Can we go to Mom and Daddy? Maybe my brother will let me borrow it. Maybe I have to go to a finance company. God says, hello, come to me. It's my good pleasure to bless you. I'm your source of everything. And I can send you exactly what you need in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. And that is why Gloria says, don't go to the world, to Egypt, the place of bondage. Go to the Word. So, what do you believe about money and about wealth? I mean, seriously, ask yourself this question. What do I believe about money and about wealth? You may find that you are conflicted about money. Most people are. Some professions of beliefs concerning money are as follows. Money is evil. I don't need money to be happy. I have just enough money to be comfortable. Yet they don't even know how they would define comfortable. So there's no debate at all concerning Paul's declaration that the love of money is the root of all evil. However, there is nothing notable, nothing noble, spiritual, or virtuous about living poor. A scarcity-minded desire to live a modest life is a limiting and damaging counterfeit of humility. And unfortunately, it is often taught within the church. Now you may be ready to shout at me, but Jesus was poor. He was born in a lowly manger and was a carpenter by trade. Just because he's a carpenter doesn't mean he was poor. Nor does the fact that he was born in a manger. Remember, at the time that he was born, they had to travel to Jerusalem. And all of the inns were full. They had to travel. It was a requirement because it was one of these feasts of God. It was the time of Sukkot, which is the fall festival, when all within the land are required to travel to Jerusalem. In John chapter 16, verse 15, Jesus said, everything, all that the Father has is mine. But he didn't stop there. In John chapter 17, verse 10, he said, and all things that are mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. So is Jesus glorified in scarcity or poverty, in those mindsets? No, he's not. He's not. If all that are the Father's are his, then how can we possibly say that Jesus was poor? Is our God poor? Let's dig into this a little further. So let's look at the truths about prosperity. The first truth, prosperity is your birthright. The second truth, wealth is evidence of a value creation. And the third one, you're already wealthy. Now let's explain what I mean by these three things. Prosperity is your birthright. That's the truth. The late preacher Charles Fillmore shocked Christians when he proclaimed, "It is a sin to be poor." Eric Buttersworth, in his book, Spiritual Economics, explains that he wasn't referring to moral turpitude, but rather to the frustration of potentiality. Being broke is a temporary condition. Being poor is a permanent mindset which is at direct odds with your heritage and which frustrates your potential as a child of God. The 14th century Persian poet Hafiz wrote, "There are so many gifts still unopened from your birthday. There are so many handcrafted presents that have been sent to you by God. The beloved does not mind repeating, 'Everything I have is also yours.' There are so many gifts, my dear, still unopened from your birthday. My friend, you can only be as wealthy as you believe you are worth, and you are worth infinitely more than you realize. Your pocketbook may sometimes be empty, but your mind should always be, brimming with light and creativity, your heart always full of love and gratitude. I'm not vilifying the poor, but I am denouncing the scarcity mindset which causes greed, fear, envy, hoarding, theft, exploitation, and even violence, and manifest in the rich and poor alike. Alan Morenus writes in his book, Everyday Holiness, humility is not an extreme. Humility is not the opposite of conceit, which would be self-effacement, but rather humility stands between conceit and self-effacement. Humility is not an extreme quality, but rather a balanced, moderate, accurate understanding of yourself that you act on in your life. This is why humility and self-esteem go hand in hand. Arrogance has an insatiable appetite for space. It claims, it occupies, it sprawls, it suffocates others. Every statement in its voice begins with I. The opposite extreme is self-debasement, shrinking from occupying any space whatsoever. It retracts meekly inside of itself. Its statements would never dare to begin with I, although in fact, if we listen carefully, they all do. Because whether we see ourselves as nothing or as everything, we are still preoccupied with the self. And both of these traits are therefore forms of narcissism. Both hint to the theme of idolatry. But proper humility means having the right relationship with self. The more you accept extreme inner attitudes that either build up the ego or tear it down, the more you deviate from the truth. True humility says there is enough space for someone else and you, or there is enough wealth for someone else and you. A small deed done in humility is 1,000 times more acceptable to God than a great deed done in pride. Think about the widow's mite here as an example. The widow walked in true humility. She gave everything that she had in the offering. She did not give from her supply of abundance, but she gave from her need. When we can grasp this concept and understand who we are, children of the Most High, children of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, we know with certainty that all of us were born to prosper, both spiritually and materially. There are only 3 ways to become wealthy: deception, coercion, and value creation. In the absence of deception and coercion, wealth is evidence of a byproduct of value creation. In other words, we only prosper to the degree that we serve others. Think about the phrase, giving back, as it refers to the philanthropy of the wealthy. This is a gross misnomer, which feeds the scarcity mindset. It assumes that the wealthy became so not by giving, but only by taking. And it is from this place of fear that so many larger evangelists and ministries are attacked. These accusations come from a place of fear, and that fear is shouting. There is no way that they could have large homes, jets, and the such unless they were taking from the donations received by the ministry. This accusation places limits on God. It is saying that the only way to obtain wealth is through deception, not the blessing of God. And how do you think this makes God feel? It reveals the doubt hidden within each individual that God desires to bless His children with good gifts. Does deception in ministry ever occur? Yes, it absolutely does. I do not deny that fact. But a prosperous ministry does not prove deception or coercion. In fact, it really proves God's desire to bless His children. And if we will allow it, He will bless us just the same. The fact is, as a child of God, it is your birthright to be wealthy, because it is your responsibility to serve. Yes, it is written, seek first the kingdom of heaven. But He concludes that with, and all these things shall be added to you. All what things? Jesus said, everything that is the Father's is His, and everything that is His is yours and mine. He didn't place limits on that by saying only the spiritual things. No. Living small is vastly different than living simply. An honest desire for unlimited wealth is a desire to maximize one's contribution. You are already wealthy. In her paradigm-shifting book, The Soul of Money, Lynn Twist teaches the powerful concept of sufficiency. She writes, we each have the choice in any setting to step back and let go of the mindset of scarcity. Once we let go of scarcity, we discover the surprising truth of sufficiency. By sufficiency, I don't mean a quantity of anything. Sufficiency isn't 2 steps up from poverty or a step short of abundance. It isn't a measure of barely enough or more than enough. Sufficiency is an experience, a context we generate, a declaration, a knowing that there is enough and that we are enough. Sufficiency doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive or aspire. It is an act of generating, distinguishing, making known to ourselves the power and the presence of our existing resources and our inner resources. Sufficiency is a context that we bring forth from within that reminds us that if we look around us and look within ourselves, we will find what we need. There is always enough. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, in the Amplified Bible, we find that Jesus said, "My grace, my favor and loving kindness and mercy is enough for you." Anytime you believe that you don't have enough money, you are trapped by the scarcity mindset. Becoming wealthy starts first and foremost with the abundance mindset. Understanding that you are already wealthy, no matter how much money you have. Without a dollar to your name, you are still entitled to gaze at the sunset, to drink in the smell of a rose, to marvel at a honeybee, to stand in amazement at the miracle of a birth. Like the water in which fish swim, Father's limitless abundance envelops us, defines our existence. To recognize that is to become instantly wealthy. So do you want to be wealthy? I hope that your answer is a resounding yes, because as a child of God, it is your birthright to be wealthy. And the only way you can become wealthy is by creating value for others. By definition, creating wealth is an act of service. When you cultivate the abundance mindset, you stand in awe at how wealthy you are, no matter where your bank account currently stands. Obedience opens the door to kingdom prosperity. Isaiah chapter 1 verse 19 in the Amplified Bible says, "If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land." In other words, your prosperity is on the other side of your obedience. Job chapter 36 verse 11 tells us, "If they obeyed and served him, they shall spend their days in prosperity and their years in pleasures." Pleasures in Hebrew is your years will be delightful. Your years will be pleasant and sweet. And in Deuteronomy chapter 28 verses 1 through 2 in the Amplified, we see, "If you will listen diligently to the voice of the Lord your God, being watchful to do all his commandments, which I command you this day, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you heed the voice of the Lord your God." They'll overtake you. They'll engulf you. They'll pile up on you, swamp you, flood you, overflow, heap, and cover you. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. It's the title of Kenneth Copeland's book, as well as Proverbs chapter 10, verse 22. But let's see what Pastor Copeland, wrote in this book. He says, "If we'll just believe what the Bible says about us and walk in the covenant of love, The blessing will produce the conditions of the Garden of Eden all around us, as surely as it did for the Israelites in the Promised Land. In fact, it will do even more for us than it did for them, because we carry the blessing inside of us wherever we go. God can send us to the hardest, thistle-growing, demon-infested place, and we can go with joy. We don't have to argue with Him about it. We don't have to complain and drag our feet. We can go in faith, knowing that God is sending us there not to live in squander or squalor, but to release the blessing that is within us and turn that dark corner of the world into a milk and honey kind of place. How awesome is that? How awesome. Proverbs 10:22 states, "The blessing of the Lord, it makes truly rich, and He adds no sorrow with it, neither does toiling increase it." That's the Amplified Bible. And it is written, "And God is able to make all grace, every favor and earthly blessing, come to you in abundance, so that you may always and under all circumstances and whatever the need be self-sufficient, possessing enough to require no aid or support, and furnished in abundance for every good work and charitable donation." That's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8 in the Amplified Bible. So let's look at faith in action. This is where we put our action steps. I encourage you again, download these slides so that you've got these squares. There's 10 things here. 10 things here. And you don't have to do them all in one day. Break it down over the next 10 days. Do one a day. But it's important that you do them. And you see, you can often get locked in love and be unable to forgive your beloved or to bend or compromise your position. We have spoken a lot about humility in today's lesson. And humility in love is the ability to rise above yourself and forgive or give in to the one you love just for the sake of love, even if you're convinced that you're right. Arrogant love is not love at all. So ask yourself, does love humble me? Am I arrogant notwithstanding? Or sometimes because I have the capacity to love? Do I realize that the ability to love comes from a greater, higher place? Comes from God. And knowing that, shouldn't I enter into any love with total humility, recognizing the great privilege of being able to love? Do I realize that through love I receive more than I give? Do I appreciate the one that I love for this? Today, swallow your pride and reconcile with the loved one that you've quarreled with. Now, as we move to the second box, for love to be eternal, it requires bonding, a sense of togetherness which actualizes the love in a joint effort, an intimate connection, kinship, and attachment benefiting both parties. This bonding bears fruit, the fruit born out of a healthy union. Start building something constructive together with a loved one. Mature love comes with and brings personal dignity, an intimate feeling of nobility and regality, knowing your special place and contribution in this world. Any love that is debilitating or breaks the human spirit is not love at all. For love to be complete, it must have the dimension of personal sovereignty. So highlight an aspect in your love that has bolstered your spirit and enriched your life, and then celebrate. If love is the bedrock of human expression, Discipline is the channel through which we express love. It gives our life and love direction and focus. Take a laser beam, for example. Its potency lies in the focus and concentration of light in one direction rather than fragmented light beams dispersed in all different directions. Discipline and measure concentrates and directs our efforts, our love in the proper directions. Another aspect of discipline is respect and awe. Healthy love requires respect for the ones that you love and for yourself. The underlying intention and motive in discipline is love. Why do we measure our behavior? Why do we establish standards and expect people to live up to them? Only because of love. Even judgment of the guilty is only to express love. In other words, punishment is not vengeance. It is just another way to express love by cleansing anything antithetical to love. Tolerance of people should never be confused with tolerance of their behavior. On the contrary, love for people includes wanting them to be the best that they can, and therefore helping them be away of anything less than perfect behavior. Hesed of Gevurah is the love in discipline. It is awareness of the intrinsic love that feeds discipline and judgment. It is the recognition that your personal discipline and the discipline you expect of others is only an expression of love, and that comes across when disciplining. It is the understanding that we have no right to judge others. We have only the right to love them, and that includes wanting them to be their best. So ask yourself, when I judge and criticize another, is it in any way tinged with any of my own contempt and irritation? Is there any hidden satisfaction in his failure? Or is it only out of love for the other? Before you criticize someone today, think twice if it is out of care and love. Examine the discipline factor of discipline. Is my discipline disciplined, or is it excessive? Do I have enough discipline in my life and in my interactions? Am I organized? Is my time used efficiently? Why do I have problems with discipline, and what can I do to enhance it? Do I take time each day for a personal accounting of my schedule and accomplishments? Make a detailed plan for spending your day, and at the end of the day, see if you've lived up to it. Not just love, but compassion has to drive discipline. Love comes from recognizing one's merits and positive qualities. Discipline channels and directs those strengths and weeds out the negative. Compassion is unconditional love. It is love just for the sake of love, not considering the other's position. You love for no reason. You love because you are a reflection of God. So ask yourself, does my discipline have this element of compassion? Be compassionate to someone you have reproached. Effective discipline must be enduring and tenacious. So ask, is my discipline consistent or only when forced? Am I perceived as a weak disciplinarian? List short-term and long-term goals and review and update it each day, and see how consistent you are, if you follow through or not. The result of discipline and might without humility are obvious. The greatest catastrophes have occurred as a result of people sitting in arrogant judgment of others. Ask yourself, am I arrogant in the name of justice? What I consider as just? Do I ever think that I sit on a higher pedestal and bestow judgment on my subjects below? What about my children, my students? A judge has to be the most humble of creatures, recognizing that he sits in judgment not by his own merit, but only because God gave the right to judge his children. So don't judge anyone unless you are going to do so selflessly with no personal bias. For discipline to be effective, it must be coupled with commitment and bonding. Both in disciplining yourself and others, there has to be a sense that discipline is important for developing a stronger bond. Not that I discipline you, but that we are doing it together for our mutual benefit. Demonstrate to your child or your student how your bonding with each other is an essential ingredient in discipline and growth. And finally, my friend, discipline, like love, must enhance personal dignity. Discipline that breaks a person will backfire. Healthy discipline should bolster self-esteem and help elicit the best in a person, cultivating his sovereignty. And that does not compromise the discipline. On the contrary, it fosters and enhances it. So ask yourself, does my discipline cripple the human spirit? Does it weaken or strengthen others and me? And when disciplining your children or your students, foster their self-respect. And now let's talk about our journal time. As you put into practice each of the faith and action steps on the previous page, journal about what you have learned through these lessons and the application of them. Journal any questions that you have. And as always, you are more than welcome to ask me. Remember, one of the benefits of journaling is that you can accurately chart your growth and recognize it more easily. Now, my friend, I would love to hear from you and to work with you as well. So, won't you schedule a session today by going to contact me at reginasanders.net and schedule your free strategy call. And for a limited time only, when you make a commitment to working with me during our strategy call, you're going to receive 10% off of our regular fees. Be sure to use coupon code SPIRITFIELD when checking out. I can't wait to speak with you. And as a bonus, as an added bonus for choosing to work with me, I'm going to send you a signed edition of your choice of one of my books that are in print, either A Journey into Understanding or My Cup Runneth Over. These signed editions will be sent after your payment for the services are received. And at this time, I'm currently only able to ship to the United States. I'm also delighted to announce that we've extended our services and now include in our services keynote speaking and book editing. So are you planning a retreat? Do you need a speaker for your event? Contact me today about the service. I teach on discipleship, healing, hearing God, and many other topics, all built on the foundation of God's Word. Are you an aspiring author? If so, contact me today and let's see how I can help you edit and publish your book. Contact me today and live your best life. And as always, I greatly appreciate you sacrificing your valuable time to listen to these videos and taking the time to download the slides. and putting the action with the lessons. I know from personal experience that as you do this, you are strengthened spiritually and physically. And I want you to always remember that you are appreciated, you are valuable, you are worthy, and you are loved. I appreciate you. Thank you for being with me today. May the Lord bless you. May He keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you. May He surround you with His favor as a shield and bring you peace which surpasses all understanding.